Thanks. I'm Kit Gage. I'm the Advocacy Director of Friends of Sligo Creek, formerly president off and on, and active with the organization for a long time. And I've known, we're really happy to have Mary Travaglini with us tonight. I've known Mary maybe almost since you were with the EP. She's been with the Department of Environmental Protection, which is a Montgomery County agency that covers a whole array of environmental, pretty much the whole array of environmental issues that you might imagine. And Mary's done a whole bunch of varieties of them since 2012, from stormwater management and green roofs, pesticide regulations, pet waste. And in recent years, how long have you been doing organic lawn? Couple years, 3, 4?
5.
All right, 5. So now she's the organic lawn and landscape manager for the Department of Environmental Protection. And I've heard her give a couple of talks, I think one in Tacoma Park a couple of years ago. And our plan tonight is for her, she's got some slides and she'll give a talk. And if you have questions, I see there's already some people putting things in chat.
Mostly just who they are.
Cool. Oh yeah, good. That's great. If you have very specific questions about what she's saying, put that in the chat and I'll try to ask Mary just clarifying questions, but otherwise put your questions in chat. And when she's done, we should be able to have a pretty good array of Q&A discussion conversations about what she's going to be talking about. So stick with us and we should be able to answer your particular questions, as well as if they're not already answered by her presentation. So Mary, take it away.
All right, great. Thank you.
Oh, and everybody is muted. Yeah, good. Okay.
Great. I'm going to just share my screen and get going. As Kit mentioned, you can put things in the chat as we go along. Definitely, if I don't see it, she will mention it, in case I don't see the pop-up along the way. I will say that this is going to be recorded and we will share the PowerPoint so that you can go back over some of this information, because some of it can get a little bit detailed and I don't speak out loud everything that's on the screen. I have it there because I know that sometimes people visually see it, absorb it, or want to go back to it later. But I'm going to talk tonight about organic lawn care and also lawn alternatives. In this, keep in mind that even if you don't have a lawn, that there are a lot of lessons in here that can be applied to just your yard or general landscaping, garden areas, even vegetable beds, because I'll be talking a lot about what benefits soils, and what benefits lawn soils also typically benefits other soils. We are going to be talking, oops, sorry, I clicked on something else. Now I need to forward. There we go. We're going to talk about why treating our lawns organically matters. And I like to put this up because a lot of folks are familiar with the issues of impervious surfaces, which are all the places that don't drain, pavement, buildings, all the hard surfaces in the county. We have 14% of our county is covered by impervious surfaces, but 28%, double that, is covered by turf grass. That's a lot of grass, and it's a large area environmentally that we don't focus on very much. So if we focus on them more in the sense of managing them organically, we could actually really turn the tides on impacts in the environment. And there are ways that you could get a lawn to benefit your environment more if it was organic. So organically managed lawns can do a better job of offsetting climate change. So carbon is stored in soils, and the deeper the lawn roots and the healthier the soil is, the more carbon we can store in our lawn areas. Lawns are actually really important for air quality. In Maryland, lawns trap 12 million pounds of airborne dust. And what's interesting about this is that they're doing it year round. So our trees do a huge job of this but also they do it when their leaves are on. In the winter, the tree leaves are not there, obviously, so they don't have the ability to trap dust with all that surface area. Whereas lawns are constantly 12 months out of the year, they have a three-dimensional surface waving around in the wind, and they are trapping that airborne dust throughout the year. So they do have a big role in air quality. They do produce oxygen, and they produce oxygen, especially when trees are dormant. So a lot of our lawn grasses will also still be green and growing when trees are dormant and not able to produce oxygen through the leaves. They do capture and infiltrate stormwater, and they can do a better job of that if the soils are healthy, not compacted. And they also provide significant erosion control in urban environments. So while there is typically a message that lawns are terrible, and I would never tell anyone to replace a forest with a lawn, they are much better than an impervious surface or bare ground or anything else like that. And the more we can care for them organically, again, the better we can actually do something with them to benefit the environment. So I'm going to go through some tips on how to care for a lawn organically. I'm going to run through a couple of slides, and then I'm going to get into more detail on it. So the first thing is to just stop using synthetic chemicals. And this comes from a lot of reasons. It's not just about the harm to humans, wildlife, pollinators, and pets, which is a big one, but there's a large amount of embodied energy that goes into creating synthetic chemicals, both fertilizers and pesticides. They also attract pests, and they cause weaker plants, and they also only feed the plant. Many of them will wash off if the plant cannot absorb them. So the way a synthetic chemical works is it's been made in the format that a plant is ready to uptake it. And typically that's done by soil microbes. So if the plant does not have the ability to absorb it when it's put in the ground and it's not ready for it, it's going to wash off into our waterways. The second is to start to tolerate some quote unquote weeds and change your expectations of what a lawn is. So many of you on this call may be comfortable with this notion already, but for a lot of folks, they think that a lawn is the same thing as a golf course or an athletic field. It is not. A lawn is a very different thing. It is supposed to be a mixture of plants. By having mixture of plants, we have some diversity for pollinators because lawns typically are not very beneficial to pollinators. We reduce the impacts from pesticides by allowing these to grow in our lawns. Many species like clover actually benefit the soil, and many of these are actually edible to humans and wildlife. So having that diversity is really important in a lawn. We also want to always mow high and sharp. So the higher the lawn can go, the highest the mower blade can go on any machine that you're using, the better. We want to keep lawns ideally over 4 inches tall. And you want to keep really sharp blades. The reason for high lawns is for a lot of reasons. Taller grass will shade out weeds. More surface area on taller grass will capture more sun to turn this into energy, and they will transpire less water by keeping the ground cool. For anyone that's ever seen or been on a golf course, they are watering nearly every day, and they dry out nearly every day. And very quickly, and that's because they mow them so short that there's a lot of solar radiation reaching the ground, and that's causing the ground to dry out. It's causing the plants to evapotranspirate water more. So the taller we can keep the grass, the more we're shading it out. Now, having sharp blades is really important because sharp blades mean that the cut evaporates less water because there's less surface area. When you have a shredded blade, there's a lot of surface area that water is going to evaporate through. It requires less energy for the plant to heal because it's only cutting a limited number of plant cells. And it also prevents attack from diseases on those plant blades, again, because there's not a lot of surface area from being shredded by dull blades. You typically want to sharpen your blades every 10 to 12 hours of use if you have the type of lawn that has pine cones and sticks and other things. If you have a lawn that doesn't have a lot of debris, you'll want to sharpen it when you start to see that those blades are starting to shred the grass. Number 4 is to always leave all of our grass clippings. They return 50 to 100% of the nitrogen that a lawn needs. They're a major source of carbon for microorganisms, which we'll talk about in a little while. And they're also a carbon sink back into the soil. Ideally, you want to chop up and mulch in as many leaves as you possibly can within your lawn as well. Understanding your soil is important. We'll talk a little bit about soil tests as we go on. This will measure levels of nutrients, the organic content in the soil. You can diagnose pest problems. There's a lot of reasons why soil samples are really important. They don't cost very much. They're typically between like $10 and $15 for one lawn area. So maintaining a healthy lawn really starts by supporting soil biology, and we'll go back into our high school biology, chemistry type classes in a few of these slides. And don't worry if some of this goes over your head. Again, you can come back and listen to it, or you can absorb whatever you can. But the biggest thing that many of us are never taught about is soil organisms. So soil organisms are really what makes the world go round. It's stardust in the soil. There's up to 1 billion organisms in 1 teaspoon of soil. So think about that tiny little teaspoon. That's not even as much sugar as most of us put in our tea or coffee. And there's 1 billion organisms in healthy soil, including 40 miles of fungal hyphae in a square foot of soil. What soil organisms do is they make nutrients soluble for plants. So they take the nutrients in the insoluble form and they convert it into the form that the plant needs, and they do it when the plant is ready versus what a synthetic fertilizer will do. They also decompose organic matter, making it stable carbon in the soil. They bind the soil with secretion, so they essentially make soil glues that hold the soil together and create moist soil. They also help immobilize nutrients so they don't wash out into our waterways. They protect our plant roots from disease, and they shape the habitat of the soil. So we're going to talk more about those later, but the next thing we're going to talk about is core aerating. So we don't want to have compacted soils. Compacted soils provide air, uncompacted soils have air for microorganisms, open areas for compost to mix in, and they put water into the soil profile. Next is overseeding the lawn. So lawns will get, they die. And a grass blade lives about an average of 7 years, and we want to have up to 7,000 blades of grass in a square foot of healthy soil. This is going to help prevent weeds and by having that dense lawn, because turf grass is actually more aggressive than most weeds that are out there, but we do need to rejuvenate that. Weeds are just opportunists looking for places where something else is not growing. So having regular overseeding is really important. We're actually coming up to the great time of year. Fall is the best time of year to overseed your lawn. The second best time is actually winter. The third best time is spring. And as needed, you can do patch seeding in the summer, but you'll require a lot of water to find success with that. We also want to keep carbon-based materials high in our soil. Having more carbon in the soil will buffer the pH. It'll increase the cation exchange for nutrients, and it will feed those microorganisms because they eat carbon. Also, carbon-based materials supply micronutrients and fight diseases. A lot of folks might not have the resources to add a lot of compost, but you consider using compost tea. We won't have time to talk about that tonight, but we do have a recipe on our website that you can use for compost tea. Also, limiting water is really important. We only want to water during establishment or drought. When watering, if you're establishing a lawn or if there's a drought, you want to water deeply. This is an inch or more of water. You can know that you've gotten to an inch or more by putting a bowl out, and while you're watering, you'll know when it reaches an inch, and then you can stop. The reason we want to water deeply is we want to get that down into the roots of deep where those grass roots are growing and where they're actively looking for water. If we do frequent shallow watering, that's actually where the weeds are benefiting, because they're taking advantage of that upper layer of the soil where they're going to flourish and thrive if you're just watering lightly and frequently. And a lot of our lawns, particularly fescue lawns, they need a little bit of rest. So summer dormancy is not going to kill them off. It's going to give them a chance to rest. It's also going to reduce the amount of water that we use in lawns. And as mentioned, it's also going to prevent weeds. Ultimately, you want to consult with a professional if you're really struggling with issues on your lawn. Seek out folks who have knowledge about organic lawn care, learn more yourself, and of course, always demand quality from anybody that you're hiring to take care of your organic lawn. I'm going to talk about soil nutrients and how to keep them high for our grass. So if anyone has ever heard of the NPK, if you've ever bought a fertilizer bag or a bottle or anything like that, you'll often see the N and the P and the K on there. Those are the top 3 nutrients that plants use. Nitrogen is used by plants to make chlorophyll, proteins, amino acids, hormones, everything they need to grow. Much of the nitrogen in the earth is in our air, but it's only made available to plants through 2 natural processes. Either lightning has to strike the ground to convert it to a soluble form for plants, or it has to be fixed by bacteria. Typically, we're looking at fixation by bacteria in lawns, not lightning strikes. Grass uses a lot of nitrogen to keep growing, so you want to have healthy soils with high bacteria counts in order to fix that nitrogen. Organic sources of nitrogen in our lawn are relatively easy. As mentioned, grass clippings return between 50 and 100% of the nitrogen that lawns need, and leaves can return a very hefty amount of nitrogen as well. There are some supplemental nitrogen sources that are organic that can be used, including compost and earthworm castings, seaweed and coffee grounds, some corn gluten, soybean meal, alfalfa meal, and then clover plants contain bacteria on their roots that fix nitrogen from the atmosphere and convert that. In fact, before the advent of a lot of pesticides and fertilizers after World War II, clover used to be a regular part of lawn mixes. So clover is actually a really important plant in lawns. The next on the NPK is the phosphorus, the P. This is important for plants to generate energy and improves growth. We have a lot of phosphorus in our soil, but microorganisms, again, are the ones that make phosphorus available to plants. They can't just take the phosphorus that's in the soil and absorb it without that assistance. Most critical in the soil are the mycorrhizal fungi. These convert phosphorus into forms that plant roots can absorb. This is just looking at a soil test. So here in phosphorus, in Maryland, the phosphorus range is really important when considering the addition, including things like compost. So when you take a soil test, you can see some bars on this soil test. You'll see the first bar is the pH, the second is the phosphorus, and then you see a few others after that. You'll see in there that the phosphorus is in the low to medium range. When it's in the low to medium range, we're actually able to add phosphorus-based materials like compost to it. If you're in that optimum range, we cannot add phosphorus materials because of our fertilizer laws in the state of Maryland. The other thing you'll see on the soil test is the organic matter, and I've blocked that out here in yellow. This particular soil test had 4.8% organic matter, which is actually quite good. Organic matter, ideally on a soil test, you want to be looking at over 5%, and it can take a while to get there, even with organic methods, but this one actually has a pretty good balance with organic matter. Organic sources of phosphorus, again, very easy. Grass clippings, grass clippings, grass clippings. The only time you would really ever want to remove grass clippings from your lawn is maybe you're about to have a wedding that afternoon and you don't want people walking through grass clippings. But grass clippings return up almost 2 pounds of phosphorus per 1,000 square feet within a year, and that exceeds the limitations of what's allowed out of a fertilizer bag. So there's really no reason why we wouldn't just use grass clippings if our phosphorus is low. Also can use leaves. They have a hefty amount of phosphorus. I will talk about leaves for a few slides here, and you can chop those up with the mower. And the more surface area that you have, smaller grass clippings, smaller bits of leaves, the faster that bacteria will gobble them up and they'll go down. You can also add phosphorus through compost, and you can purchase endomycorrhizal fungi to increase that conversion of the stable phosphorus in the soil. The third on the NPK is the potassium. This is for overall grass health, helps it become drought and cold resistant, resist pests, and so on. It's also usually bound in insoluble forms in mineral soils, can only be extracted by microorganisms, fungi, and very slow weathering from the soil. Aeration is really important for potassium uptake by plant roots, so the bacteria and fungi can convert that potassium to a form that the roots can uptake. Organic sources, not too difficult. Typically, potassium is not low in most lawns, but compost can be used, and kelp meal and seaweed are great sources of potassium. They also have micronutrients in them, and also wood ash. This is literally just the ash from wood fires, can supply potassium and micronutrients. You do have to be careful with wood ash because it can raise the pH. It has a very high pH. But we also need to get those microorganism numbers up because the microorganisms are the ones converting all of these materials. So compost can be added, earthworm castings, which is just literally earthworm poop, and compost tea are great sources of microorganisms. You can purchase what's called EM, effective microorganisms, and apply those to the soil. You can also purchase endomycorrhizal fungi, and there's a few other things out there that are a little more obscure, but also can be added in order to get there. Even just a handful of healthy garden or forest soil mixed into whatever other amendments you're doing can bring microorganisms into your lawn. Now, microorganisms do eat carbon, so they need a lot of carbon material in the lawn. Carbon in the soil prevents soil compaction. It stores nutrients and moisture. It provides food and habitat for all those microorganisms. And it's also exuded when plant roots die. So the more active our plants are through healthy soils, the more that they can exude carbon back into the soil. In order to get sources of carbon, very easy again. As mentioned, grass clippings and leaves are immediate sources of carbon. The grass clippings are already there if you're mowing a lawn, and leaves are pretty common in our environment, so not a problem there. You can also add carbon through compost, through dry seaweed, particularly if you're in a coastal area, that might be more available. You can purchase the worm castings, and you can also add things like sawdust, aged wood chips, or composted newspaper into your compost. And the great thing about fall is that everybody's got a neighbor, or you might yourself have a straw bale out for decorations, and people never know what to do with their straw bale at the end of the season. Well, the best thing to do with that straw bale when you're done with it is spread it out in the lawn and run the lawnmower over it to chop it up in small pieces, and the bacteria will have a heyday with that. So it's a great way to recycle that right back into the soil. Our needs for micronutrients, particularly if lawns are stressed or you've had heavy events and things of that on there, sea minerals contain all the elements on the periodic chart. Wood ash tea can be made just like a compost tea to add some of our other micronutrients. Blackstrap molasses can be added to compost tea or a watering can. That includes trace elements. And then, of course, compost micronutrients might vary depending what's put in the compost pile. So people do ask a lot about pH. A lot of folks usually hear something about, oh, sweeten the soil with limestone, or your pH has to be in a certain range for soils. There is a little bit of science to that, but it is important to know that pH is a measurement of hydrogen in the soil, and hydrogen itself is not a nutrient. So when we're messing with hydrogen, we can really mess with the actual nutrients that are in the soil, because hydrogen is a cation, as are all the nutrients like calcium and magnesium and potassium and nitrogen and things like that. So when you adjust pH by putting down something like limestone, the calcium in large amounts will replace that hydrogen that's attached to the soil, but it's going to knock off more weakly held nutrients on there. And you're going to cause a seesaw, a temporary seesaw that adjusts the pH but really messes with your nutrients in the soil. So it is best, unless your soils are so bad, pH is so off the charts that you cannot grow grass there at all, you don't want to be messing with your pH. You want to be focusing on organic amendments and soil health, not the pH. Another thing that will show up, and I'll show you a chart here, is the calcium magnesium ratio on your soil test. So calcium and magnesium are both really important for lawns. Calcium strengthens plant cells, maintains the pH, stimulates the metabolism of the plants, improves the structure of the soil, and magnesium is important for production of chlorophyll. But if you have a deficiency of one or an imbalance, you can get compacted soils or weak grass. This is a segment from a soil test, and you can see that I'm talking about the calcium to magnesium ratio here. The calcium to magnesium ratio on a soil test should be 5 to 8 parts calcium to 1 part magnesium. So your calcium should be about 60 to 85%, and magnesium about 10 to 30%. And combined, those numbers should be 80% of the total, what's called the cation exchange. So I put the cation exchange on here, which is the hydrogen, the potassium, the calcium, magnesium, and the sodium. On there, the calcium is 65 and the magnesium is 20. So the calcium's in a really good range, right? It's in between that 60 and 85. The magnesium is off the charts. It's not between 10 and 13, it's between 20. And the combined amount of that is over 80%. It's 85% of that total. So that while the calcium is great, the magnesium is very problematic. And this was not suspected when we took this soil test, because this lawn had very compacted soils. And that imbalance right there, that high amount of magnesium, is what's causing the compacted soils. You can get sources of calcium to add to your lawn, I like to talk about amendments that are not coming from a mine. So the sources of calcium that are not mined are either from oyster shells, which are ground down and they're abundant in our area, or by using wood ash. So those are good sources of calcium if they're needed to restore a balance of calcium in the soil. I'm going to talk a couple slides about leaving the leaves, because this is the time of year that people talk about leaving the leaves. So I put, how many leaves would a woodchuck leave if a woodchuck could chuck leaves? I think that's kind of funny, but I don't know about the rest of you. So I've got 4 options for you. One is to give them back to the plants and the critters. That is the top thing that we can do for the environment. It is the best thing we can do if you have the capacity to do it. There are ways you can do this. One is to mulch it right back under the trees. You can give them right back to the trees, rake them in, just, don't pile them up all around the bark so you don't have any moisture and mold issues around the bark. But leaves are eaten by the soil organisms, and that is how trees grow. They take their carbon back. They need it from the soil in order to get bigger. So using it as tree mulch is great. Garden mulch is great instead of getting a regular mulch. And also you can suppress weeds really well with a nice deep layer of leaves. And I know a lot of folks who put their leaves in like up to a foot deep, and their perennials still pop up in the spring. So you can use them as a great mulch, and they're going to just add huge amounts of organics to the soil. And by keeping them like this, you're also allowing all the insects and critters that are nesting in them over the winter to keep them whole. You can also put them in veggie gardens. One of my former bosses used to put 2 feet of leaves. He would not only use his own leaves, he would get leaves from neighbors, and he would put 2 feet, at least 2 feet of leaves in his veggie beds. And come spring or early summer, he would just plant directly into that basically leaf mulch that has composted down. And he always has a great veggie garden with very low weed pressure and very happy plants. So that's option 1, and it's the best choice of what you can do. The next thing is, you have too many leaves, you can give them back to the soil. So while we can't all keep our leaves or don't have these places to put them, and we might have mature trees, next step would be to chop them up. So if you have a lawn, to get that lawnmower out and chop those leaves up into small amounts. I think Kit uses a leaf vacuum and chops them through her leaf vacuum, but you can chop them up and they will break down very quickly. So the more surface area, the faster bacteria will break them down. Next option is to get a compost bin and try to compost at home. You can get free bins from the county. For those of you that are in the Silver Spring area, the Tacoma Park Maintenance Yard has them, and the Whole Foods in Silver Spring has them. We have on our website all the places you can get these geo bins from the county at no cost. They are not for food waste, they are for yard waste, but you can compost at home. And the very last option, but of course doable, is to send them away to the compost. You're putting them out for leaf collection. I know in the Sligo Park Hills area, you all have a lot of leaves, can't necessarily handle all of them in the yard space that you have. And so the last choice would be to send them away for compost. And then the last set of slides I'm going to give are some ideas about losing the lawn. So lawns, again, they're not great for pollinators, wildlife, things like that. So you do have some options for getting rid of lawns. Putting in conservation landscapes, putting in rain gardens, reforesting your property. And some ways you can do this is we have Rainscapes rebates. You can also do these things on your own. You can intercept a lot of stormwater runoff from impervious surface by putting in rain gardens, use native plants to replace your lawn, use native plants to replace bare areas where you just can't get that lawn to grow well, deal with areas infested with non-native or invasive species by replacing them with good gardens. Native plants are really important. Why have native plants? There's more ecosystem benefits for native plants. They support our local pollinators and birds. They don't require watering after establishment. They have deeper root systems that help infiltrate water and improve our soil quality. And they require no fertilizer because they're adapted to our soils and typically require little to no pesticides. These are some images from some of our Rainscapes projects, which are conservation gardens and rain gardens, where folks had lawns in these areas before, and they did their whole yard and converted it, got rid of every square inch of lawn and converted them to beautiful gardens. So those are options. You can do conservation landscapes. These are not necessarily directing stormwater in a collection basin like a rain garden. And these, again, are conversion examples where people have taken the entire lawn and converted it over from lawns. And these are all right here in Montgomery County. Here's some examples of some of the rain gardens that have been put in through our projects. Beautiful, many, throughout the year. Wonderful. This is actually not too far away from Sligo Park Hills. This is somebody who took their steep slope that probably used to be a lawn, and they've got a native Pacora ground cover in there that's just beautiful, and year round it's covered and it requires very little maintenance for them. So it's a fantastic spot. This is an example of a recent project, so where it's young and again took out all the lawn, converted it, and eventually is going to have much larger plants and fill in that area. We do have a lot of templates on our website. You can just go to rainscapes.org for that. That takes you to the county's rain garden website. And we've got templates for plant combinations for each zone, plant quantities, how many you need, multiple options, and you can benefit from learning from what other people have done there. And again, more information on the Rainscapes program, how to get rebates there at rainscapes.org. And we also have this fantastic program called Tree Montgomery. And here you get free shade trees. I realize, again, down in your neighborhoods, maybe you already have too many shade trees and maybe you don't have room for more, or maybe it's time to replace them. But the county does have a program. We plant very large shade trees and we have them warranted for several years. So nothing needs to happen on your end beyond the application, the choosing the species, and working with the planner on which species and where they're going to go. Some properties have received 1 tree and some properties have received 60 trees. So it really depends on the size of your property, but it's a fantastic program that I definitely encourage people to take advantage of. If you can't take advantage of, keep it in mind, tell businesses about it, your congregations about it, your community centers, schools, you name it, we plant it. As long as it's not federal state property, we can plant on those areas. For information and to apply, you just go to treemontgomery.org. Again, it's going to take you to the county's website on that. And with that, I realized I went relatively quickly, but I didn't want to keep you all up too late on a what is it, Wednesday night. So I'll answer any questions that you have and I'll stop sharing so I can see. And
Thank
feel
you.
free to type
Oh,
them
that
in
was great.
or
Thanks so
just type
much.
in. Yeah.
There was the only question I've got so far was about where do you get your mower blades sharpened? And that I know is an ongoing problem question. And I know on the Tacoma Horticultural Club, there was days of conversation about this. And I don't know if I think I know Tacoma Ace at Tacoma Park has sharpening, and I believe they will do mower blades. Obviously, you would have to remove the blade from the mower and bring it in, which is a pain in the neck.
That's a great question. So there are that is always a challenge. Many of the hardware stores do sharpen blades. I recommend usually to people to have 2 blades so that while one is sharp, you could either get the other one sharpened and have it ready, or take them both at once so that you can just make one trip. There are actually blade sharpeners that go and rotate through many of our farmers markets. So you want to look up on our farmers market schedule when they're there. I know, like, I live in Rockville, for example, and the people who do the sharpening, they're not at the Rockville market every Saturday because they rotate through markets. And I know they go down to Pike and Rose, and I know they're over in Silver Spring. I'm on their email listserv so that I can see when they're at different locations. So you can follow with the farmers markets and find that out. And like I said, a lot of the hardware stores will sharpen them. You could also team up with some folks in your neighborhood that might be good at this, and see whether or not a team could get together and maybe you can learn to sharpen from them and learn how to sharpen on your own, maybe borrow their tools and so on. But of course, it's always easier if you can get someone else to do it. Someone asked what it costs to sharpen a mower blade. I think when I last was with a friend at the Rockville market, because I live in an apartment now, so I don't sharpen anything, but I think it was maybe $12. to sharpen a mower blade. And the nice thing about having a professional do it is they're balancing it for you. So it's definitely worth, even if it's $20, it's worth the cost. And you can avoid sharpening them if you clear your lawn of sticks and pine cones and tennis balls and all those things before you go out there, because then they won't dull up as quickly. So someone said I use a push mower. It sounds like there's advantage to having something powered. What do you think? I mean, a push mower is powered. It's just powered by you, and as long as it's sharp, they are great. It does depend on some of the older ones. The blades don't raise, so they will cut a little bit lower than you want to. So I would say if you want to stick with a push mower, see if you can get one that has higher blades on it, for those reasons. But there's no reason why you have to have a powered mower. If you want to go powered and you have the money, get a robot mower, because that's going to benefit you in a million ways. But they are expensive. Do you have recommendations on where to get soil tests? Yes, I'm going to put it in the chat right now. I'm going to put our website, and it's in there, montgomerycountymd.gov. That's the first for all of the county's pages. And if you just do it /lawns, everything in there that I talked about today and more about how to take a soil test, how to read a soil test, and where to get a soil test is in there. So we have a list. I haven't updated it recently, so some of the labs might be gone. Look, Kit's holding up a soil test bag right there. They typically will send you the bag. They will send you the instructions, and you pay when you send it back in. Also, some of our hardware stores do it. So ask at the front desk if they do soil testing, because I know, like, I haven't been in every hardware store recently, but I know recently I was in Christopher's in Sandy Spring, and right there at the front desk, they had the test you could take, you could bring it back to them, and they shipped it off for you. So some of the hardware stores do it as well, typically the smaller ones, obviously.
And that's
Feel
pretty
free
cheap
to
too. It's like 10 or $15, as you
Yeah,
said.
$10 to $15 for soil test. You do want to take one in every different area of your lawn. So let's say you have like a shady sloped backyard and a sunny flat front yard, or just a front yard and a backyard. They don't have to be different. You want to do a soil test for each area because they're going to be different. And ignore everything they say about pH. Whatever advice they send back to you, don't do the pH part.
One thing I was going to add, you mentioned that I shred my leaves. I shred some of my leaves, and I use I do vegetable, not meat, but vegetable composting in my yard, and I use the shredded leaves in with that compost, and I don't use that plastic compost container that you talked about because of keeping rats and mice and all those guys out. But shredded leaves are, if you're doing home composting, shredded leaves are really useful for to make a mixture of
Right.
materials.
And also, if you have the space, if you have a large enough property, and especially if you do composting and you have a place to store them, get a couple of those, brown paper leaf bags, put dry leaves in them, and stick them in your shed or your garage or whatever. And over winter, they'll just sit there and stay dry. And that's great for when you need that brown material in your compost, or you need a little bit more for whatever job you're doing in the yard. Someone asked about thatching, and it's more about, people talk about dethatching. That used to be a thing. It used to be a lawn technique that people would say you should dethatch your lawn. Now, what thatch is actually natural in lawns, and thatch will form like a sort of a thick mat of roots between the grass. Thatch is typically never a problem, especially if the soils are healthy, because the soils will break down. Again, remember, the microorganisms eat carbon, and dried thatch is carbon. So they will eat that really quickly. If you have unhealthy soils and a really heavy thatch load, you're better off aerating, not thatching, aerating that lawn and improving the lawn soils, and you'll probably never have a thatch problem. Even after one aeration, you're probably never going to build up thatch again. But dethatching is not a thing anymore. I see a question: transitioning mosquitoes. The mosquitoes spraying companies tell us that spraying is benign for insects. I doubt that claim, but do you have expertise in that, and can you comment? Yes, it's almost a whole nother presentation, but I will tell you that the sprays that they use will kill all insects. They are not specific to mosquitoes, and they are typically sprayed at the time of day that mosquitoes are not flying, and they have a very low efficacy rate on mosquitoes. Also, mosquitoes, in again, for another presentation, I can go into the details, but mosquitoes will fly up to a mile. So you can do a temporary spray in a yard, and you're going to kill any insect that those sprays encounter, including all the ones that can't fly away. Everything that's, on the plants and is resting on things, all the scale insects, and it also kills all the beneficial insects that are important for our plants. So we do see trends. I don't know if it's been correlated, but people have their yards sprayed for mosquitoes and other things, and then their plants get sick. They're like, oh, my plant has this disease, my plants are doing that. It's because all of the insects that are dealing with the fungi and the bacteria and the viruses that attack our plants have also been killed off. So mosquito spraying is not benign. The sprays that they say, when they say they're natural, they are not natural. They're a pyrethroid, which is, there's pyrethrins, which come from magnolia, not magnolia,
Chrysanthemum.
chrysanthemums, thank you. They come from chrysanthemums. That's a pyrethrin, and they have modified something synthetically called a pyrethroid, which does the same thing as a pyrethrin. And they will say it's natural because it was, it's just what chrysanthemums make and things like that. It's been made in a lab. It is a synthetic, and it does have there are a lot of problems with mosquito spraying. If you want more information, I can email Kit some blogs that we've written about the problems with mosquito spraying and what things you can do in your yards that you can spread around. Someone asked, if you want to replace grass with natives, what's the least labor intensive way to dig up and get rid of the grass in the first place? And where do you dispose of the grass? In my case, is some grass and a lot of weeds. So typically landscapers that work in the organic space that are redoing a lawn will do exactly what you need to do. And that is smothering the existing lawn. Typically, we're all not a fan of using more plastic in our environment, but you want to take a heavy black plastic and cover the area with that black plastic and let the sun bake that. So it's going to build up moisture and it's going to build up heat, and that's going to kill off almost everything under that black plastic. I can't give you an exact timeline of how long, because it's going to depend on the time that you leave it, but usually it's going to be several weeks of that black plastic down. And when you pull that back, everything underneath there is already dead. So you can either pull that up and compost it. You can compost it right back into the soil right then. And that black plastic method also kills a lot, like probably, I'm going to guess 90% or more of your weed seeds, because it's basically solarizing the soil, and it's heating it to a temperature that's killing off just about everything. You could do it with a flame weeder. I wouldn't recommend it for a large area, but that's also possible. And the other way to do it would, if you have what really is like a turf, you can get a turf cutter that cuts off the turf just like they use at turf farms and roll it out. And what do you want to do if you have to get rid of that material? If you don't have space on your lawn, you can dispose of it with any yard waste pickup. So if you have yard waste pickup in your area, it can go up to yard waste, or you can take it to the transfer station if you have a large volume and want to get it off property to the yard trim area at the transfer station in Shady Grove.
And the third way is lasagna gardening, where you put some cardboard down and then some mulch down on top of that and leave that for a while. It's not as effective as your black plastic solarizing, especially in the summer. But if you have a few months, you can do that, and you're leaving the grass because it's dead underneath. It's been smothered, and you've got a pretty good organic layer on top of that, not more than an inch or so. And then you just plant on top of that. You don't have to move
Yeah,
it
it looks
away.
like Christine said she did it. So yes, get everybody's Amazon boxes from the neighborhood, get all the tape off of them, put them down typically 1 or 2 layers deep. You can also use thick layers of newspaper if you save up newspaper paper to do that, and then compost and mulch, and then you plant right into it.
Let me just mention back on the mosquito issue that
Sure.
I know Christine's neighborhood and some of y'all's, as well as Sligo Park Hills, we've got a GAT trap program, which is non-poisonous mosquito trapping system, which we did in our neighborhoods a few years ago, and a number of us are still doing that. So it's a reasonably effective, very low tech, relatively low tech way of handling that. And if people have questions about that, they can let me or Christine know.
Right. And I would encourage everyone and to tell your neighbors to clean your gutters, because that is one major source of it. And also to look for those corrugated black plastic tubes that come off of gutters. They hold water. They are a great mosquito breeding ground that's out of sight. Most people are not aware that that is often a source of mosquitoes when they've gotten rid of all the other standing water in their lawns. But there's a lot of ways we can bring down the populations as a community with traps, basically population control of the mosquitoes.
Right.
Oh, and I will put, I'm going to put my email in the chat in case anyone has specific questions that they don't think to answer tonight or want to know more about.
Okay. Are there other questions? If you wanted to unmute and ask directly, you could do that too. Now we've got, we can go a couple more minutes, I think, till 8:30 if people have questions. But if not, you all are, well, quite knowledgeable people, I think, the people I know.
And my email is on the chat if anybody needs to email me directly.
Cool.
Right.
Thanks. No, I'm
Yes,
glad.
of course.
I think we may be good.
Excellent. Well, thank you everyone for coming. Really appreciate your time and your patience on a Wednesday night. And I hope you're all enjoying this fall weather.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Mary. That was
You're welcome.
very efficiently, but thoroughly done.
Thanks, Kit.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, Christine. Appreciate it, everyone.